Yes, hello, folks. Welcome to the weekly Manchester United podcast. I'm your host, as always, Phil Brown. Joined with my excellent co-host, James Rhodes here. Of course, first episode in the season. We're on the tail end of the World Cup. Lots to talk about. James, of course, where Utd Tielemans signing is just imminent. Darlow, Andrey Santos, United's new stadium. It's a number of other things to talk about. First of all, mate, how was your summer?
It's good so far. Still busy, still ongoing, tiring. The World Cup has been has been a really fun reprieve overall from days where you never know what might be going on in the football world and some of the quiet. But I've really enjoyed the World Cup. I think it's been a very entertaining one as well, and a bit sad to see it dwindling down towards the end here.
You know, normally the World Cup is like something that staves off the withdrawals. It's usually not something that I'm quite excited about watching, or international football in general.
Yeah.
But I have to say, I've really actually enjoyed this World Cup. Some of the football has been really enjoyable, and most of the games have been entertaining. Of course, we're down to the last four, so we've got a few days left of this World Cup. Be interested to see what happens, whether Kabi Manu gets some minutes on the field. One of the most bizarre inclusions that, to not find a single moment in this World Cup where you trust putting them on the field to make them feel part of it, almost seems like there's something personal there. I understand that this
Thomas Amorim at the helm for England here.
But I understand this level you can't be sentimental.
Yeah.
But to me, I think that, there's been games where they could have found 10 minutes to bring Kabi on.
100%.
But nonetheless, the dividend is you need to get back a player that's fresh for next season. Would have preferred he going on holiday, but nonetheless, you never know. Yeah. He could play a big part in these semi-finals and finals because he is a big game player. He's someone that shows up. Wouldn't surprise me to see Kabi Manu in extra time in an England game come on score an important goal. So this World Cup's not over just yet. Nonetheless, James, we're sitting here, we're talking about new signings. We're wondering what new signings we'd be talking about when we record our first episode, which run about this stage. I don't know if anyone 2 weeks ago would have said Andrey Santos and Utd Tielemans and Darlow.
Yeah, I mean, maybe Darlow's the most predictable of that, with some links. I think it was between him and Sam Johnstone for a bit there for that backup keeper role, which, by the way, given the quality of the keepers that we've had, it is important. I mean, Sergio Romero was really, really helpful when he was at the club, having a good backup keeper when you're in multiple competitions. Obviously, we didn't really feel it last year, but I will say, Onana played one game last season, and it was against Grimsby, and that lost us that cup competition almost single-handedly. So it is useful having a good, decent backup keeper, and Darlow is quite serviceable in that regard. He won the starting spot over a keeper they'd signed over at Leeds,
I'm in two minds about that, right? Because it makes sense, but when you have a goalkeeper that's almost good enough to start, there's a temptation to start him in certain games. Arsenal did this with Kepa in the League Cup final, and it cost them the League Cup final.
Yeah,
they had played Raya in the Cup final. So I sort of am in two minds about it, where it's like being a number two goalkeeper typically is a position for a guy who's at the tail end of his career, who's not expected to start anymore. Darlow ended up being Leeds' number one goalkeeper for a significant part of last season. So, and who knows what type of Lamans you're going to get back after. I mean,
I think it'll be okay.
Yeah, if there's one guy
he's got that mentality that's just like,
he has a mentality where he can push, but he's a human being, so who knows?
Yeah.
So, but
either way, you want to have some confidence in a backup because you never know what happens, right?
Yeah, of course. Always. It's you get the best backup goalkeeper you can get because you're right. Something could happen, and the fact that United were starting with buying Deer and goal last season cost them that Arsenal game. If Lamans picks up an injury, all of a sudden, the last thing we want is a Bayern Deer being put in goal. I mean, it would just it would deflate the balloon. But Utd Tielemans, what's your thoughts, my friend?
Yuri Tielemans is such an interesting one because, like, Andrey Santos, we'll talk about him in a minute. You could have maybe predicted young, kind of a little out of favor at Chelsea. They tried to get him last season. Yuri Tielemans is like the complete out of nowhere crazy, and the fact that it was done in an hour too. We didn't even have one day of reports to be like, oh yeah, we're thinking about Yuri Tielemans to even process it. It was just like, Yuri Tielemans is done. Release clause. He's flown into Manchester for his medical already. Okay, great. Tielemans is obviously akin to some degree, which maybe is notable, the Casemiro signing in some ways, in that he's a very experienced player who can come in to a very young, what is expected to be a very young midfield with Kobbie Mainoo, Andrey Santos. He's very experienced, Premier League experience. He won trophies at Leicester. He won trophies at Aston Villa. United certainly know about him. They almost signed him when he went to Leicester and then thought about it again later. He was considered at a few points a replacement when Paul Pogba left. He's been around United's radar for such a long time. And I think what I really like about it, the more I think about it, is, United have had an interesting strategy, which is that if we look at last summer, they got some, mentality, the mental aspects, the drive, the motivation is everything in terms of how they're building it. And we saw over this last season how much it mattered that the culture never fell apart, even with changing coaches. Usually you have a disaster when that happens. And even at the end of Amarim's tenure, they didn't quit. They weren't quitting. They weren't falling apart. They weren't downing tools. There wasn't that drop off in that sense. And that, Cunha wanted to join United over anybody. Mbeumo turned down other deals to join United over anybody. Šeško turned down other deals to join, and that was after a 15th place finish. We've seen this summer Elliot Anderson pretty much turn United down. Mateus Fernandes turn United down for money, for other intentions and all of that. And Tielemans represents somebody who's a United fan from a long, long time ago. Clearly jumped at the opportunity to join United. Villa are in the Champions League too, if I'm not mistaken, unless I'm forgetting something. They're in the Champions League. He's won trophies there. He wants to join United. He wants to be a part of United more than anything, and to really push on at this club. I think that matters in that respect. I think Unai Emery said about him, his best quality is his drive, his mentality, and all of that. And I think that's something we've talked about for so many years that we need at United to keep building that kind of culture. And add to that, he's incredibly talented and presents a profile we don't have at the club right now. One of those deeper passing midfielders who can move the ball around. So I'm the more I think about it in context, the more I like it.
Let me ask you about supposedly Elliot Anderson turning United down. Was there ever an offer accepted for Elliot Anderson to turn United down?
No, I mean,
United, because at the end of the day, it's the same with Mateus Fernandes. Mateus Fernandes had two choices: go to Spurs or stay at West Ham.
Yeah.
Now, if United were the only club in for him, then it would have been different. West Ham would have had to hold him to United on terms that weren't favourable. Then you have a choice. Now, to be fair, Mateus Fernandes could have went to West Ham and said, I don't want to speak to Spurs. I have no interest. I don't care if they have a £300 million bid accepted. I won't go there. And forced West Ham's hand. And I think he definitely could have done that. He didn't want to do that. That's okay. If you are indifferent between going to United and Spurs, you're not a Man United player.
Yeah, exactly.
As far as I'm concerned, you've done us the biggest favour possible by letting us know that right now. You're sitting there talking about Bruno Fernandes being your idol. You have an opportunity to go to Manchester United. Brandon Mbeumo had similar dilemmas
with Spurs specifically.
Football clubs and said to Brentford,
"I'm not Champions League.
Yeah, I'm not going anywhere, but Manchester United got his Manchester United move, put Brentford in a position where we have to accept, less favourable terms of Manchester United than what we would have got elsewhere, because it's the only place that the player wants to go. He didn't do that. Subsequently, United have signed 2 players that was on nobody's radar. But these are 2 players to me, James, that tells me that these players are an emergent property of a process that says these candidates tick every box.
Yeah.
And not rather than an agent calling up United and saying, hey, do you want this player? This is a very deliberate process that's led them to Andrey Santos, that's led them to Utd Tielemans. Tielemans is 29, in his prime, Premier League proven, comes in, improves you right away. Yep. At 35 million, we're sitting here listening to City going to 100 million again for Bawadi, which is just an insult, by the way, to the Premier League. Like, come on, lads. 225 million on 2 midfielders. Let's look at what they've spent over the last couple of windows. I mean, you have to be touching $1 billion.
Same as late, isn't it?
To Liverpool.
Yeah.
And then you look at that and go, is it even realistic to expect United to compete with teams that spend that much more? I mean, if it was in reverse, where United were spending that much money, no one would be expecting other clubs to catch them unless you have that spending power. I mean, there's such a massive advantage for these football clubs that United don't have that. Maybe in a couple of years of consistently qualifying for the Champions League, doing business properly, United can go to £150 million for a midfielder, but they're nowhere near the ability to do that right now. And to me, if you have to stretch your resources in an extremely prudent way as buying a young midfielder who's very, very well thought of and buying a midfielder that's smack bang in his prime, that to me, Andrey Santos and Tielemans is a better option for United than Matheus Fernandes on his own.
100%. And I was going to say, obviously it comes out to the same price, 85 million, for the 2 players to what Matheus Fernandes went for. And obviously it's they're either the luckiest people on earth or they really have nailed the planning down. And I'm not much of a believer in the luck aspect being just completely random in that respect, that, they go from a 35 million pound Ederson deal for an experienced footballer that they like, who is experienced, he's been around, they think brings a certain qualities, and they find a 35 million pound player for the alternative 2 days later. That's not luck. They certainly know what they're doing and in planning things through that way. And they might have said, hey, we prefer to get the younger player at the time, but with any concerns, the gap between it removes and is gone. And you go, well, we're not even going to mess around with this issue that may be there. We'll sign Tielemans. But, it is reminiscent to me, though, I will say, of we'll see how it pans out. Like when we looked at Liverpool spending absurd money last summer and it went poorly. It's a different Man City. I know they're spending an absurd amount of money. I'm not saying they're buying bad players, but it's no Pep Guardiola. There's no, Bergenstein. It's a different group. Mm-hmm. There's no Omar Barada. I mean, he was in the room with a lot of them back then. And I know City have an enormous amount of money, but I almost get an idea like maybe the circumstances have flipped a little, because I'm looking at United doing business 50 and 35 while someone else is paying 85 million. And it does remind me of back when we would have bought Maguire for 80. Not an insult to Maguire, lovely guy. We paid too much money, right? When we would have bought Maguire for 80 and then seen City go and get Diaz and someone else for the same price, get 2 players for the same price, that would build their squad out. Because that's what happened back then. They would go and buy players in that 40. It's okay. They would go and get players in that 40 to 50 million bracket and get 2 of them while we'd be chasing 1 for 85, 90 million. And they'd build their squad out. And I always remember looking at City's team, and I think it was one season I was looking at Pep's team, and I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, he's got 6 forwards, 6 midfielders. Nobody has to even play 50 games. You have all these options, and it's like everybody's playing between 20 and 40 games. They're all fresh. You don't have the injury crises. You don't have people running down on fitness, and that's why you can do these 100-point seasons year after year. But I do feel as though we're moving a little bit more in that direction where, City didn't used to. I know they spent a lot of money, don't get me wrong, but they didn't used to buy like these 100 million signing after 100 million signing. They built their team with a lot of those 50 million pound players, 40 to 50 range. And it feels like that's a bit of the strategy we've taken now, is we'd rather just fill the team out with these good options than go and spend 90, 100 million, 120 million on one guy, especially in the stage that the team is at right now.
Well, especially when you take a look at all the 100 million plus footballers. How many of them are actually value for money? I mean, I was reading it the other day. I was told Declan Rice, I would have to say, has been valued for money.
Yeah. They won a title and all that. So,
but you start looking outside of that. There's not too many of them are worth that type of money.
No.
And United success rate in this particular bracket of a player around the 50 million mark is much greater. I'm not saying that you overlook quality football players and sign players in the secondary bracket and you're guaranteed success. That's obviously the wrong calculus. But I feel much more confident in a player's ability to come to Manchester United, because £100 million football at Manchester United is totally different than £100 million football at Manchester City.
100%.
You will be allowed bad games at Man City as long as you're winning trophies. There'll be a lot, they'll be a lot kinder to you and a lot more charitable. But at United, that's not even enough to save you. I mean, Bruno Fernandes has to meet a certain target every year, or he's constantly being questioned. Right? Yeah. I mean, he's still even after the World Cup. But you look at, I think that this is a really sensible led strategy. They want players that want to be at the football club. I understand that when you're dealing with very elite level players, maybe they don't have to be a Manchester United fan, but they have to want to play for the football club.
Right.
But Matheus Fernandes, I don't think want to play for Manchester United bad enough. To me, Jim, I don't understand how that to me is almost like Alejandro Garnacho situation, where it's so obviously being, misled, being badly advised.
Yeah.
And with all due respect to Spurs, it wouldn't surprise me with Tonali and Fernandes, they're still struggling next season. Like, I don't think those two players are going to completely transform Tottenham. If you're going to spend 100 million thereabouts on each, then they better be transformative. Van Hecke, is Van Hecke going to transform? I don't think so.
Yeah. I think that they finished 17th twice. It's not a fluke. They finished just above relegation twice now. It's not, United did it once. The next season, even when changing managers, United were at 6th at the time and climbed up to 3rd. They finished twice. This is not a fluke. This is not an occasion. There's something very wrong there. And, maybe they've spent enough to keep themselves away from the relegation fight. Probably. I can't see them, but although 3 in a row for Matheus, you never know, might be going for it. But it's, I can't see it. It feels like that the wrong way round for them when they need a whole team clear out. Honestly, when you're facing that kind of problem, you need to redo the whole thing.
Yeah, and when you look at why Spurs finished 17th in those particular seasons, it wasn't because they didn't have the players to finish higher up the table. It had to do with what was going on inside the football club.
Yeah, 100%.
And Roberto De Zerbi, to me, isn't exactly. I mean, this is not a Spurs podcast, but there's nothing about that gives me security or confidence if I'm a Spurs fan. Like, I think that Spurs would have been better doing United's business.
Mm-hmm.
Bringing in people like Andrey Santos, bringing in Tielemans, bringing in sensible signings. And then when you get to a position where you qualify for the Champions League and then you have something to build on. But right now, they need players like Sandro Tonali's already talking about going to AC Milan. He hasn't kicked the ball for Spurs. Mate, but let me ask you about Ederson. Bit of a bizarre situation, James. It's hard for me to make sense of what actually happened there. I don't know. Like, release clauses are not public. Mm-hmm. You have to have contacts within the industry to understand who's release clause, who you can activate. So it's possible they became aware of the Tielemans release clause as they're closing on the Ederson business and decided Tielemans is a better signing, which I believe Tielemans is a better signing for me than Ederson. Andrey Santos is a better signing for me than Ederson. Both of them have Premier League experience. Andrey Santos is much younger. His potential is much higher. I'm not saying I would have turned my nose up at Ederson, but what do you think happened there?
Well, there's a lot of theories on this, but I do have to say that Ederson has been tracked for a very long time for United as well. I mean, when they went into last summer, they wanted to sign him. They were they thought he was someone they could bring in, and then at the time Atalanta said no. They raised the price. They said he's unsellable this summer, and all of that. So I don't think they changed their mind over the span of a couple of weeks after agreeing that deal so early on with him. But what seems to be the case, and I believe this to be true, is that whenever he went over to Brazil, to the Brazilian national team in the US, not to Brazil, but to the Brazilian national team, and they did a medical over there, they just found something they didn't like. And then I think that why it looks funny is that happened weeks ago. 3-4 weeks ago now, right? Because he joined the Brazilian national team quite early before the first game went off with when there was an injury, right? Because you can't bring players after that. So it was actually quite a long time ago that he joined the Brazilian national team, had that medical. United would have seen the records and gone, okay, hold on a second. But we can't do anything about this for a month now until Brazil are out. We don't know what to. But I think that's why it kind of looks like they just changed their mind and signed other players, because I believe they spent the last month going, this might not happen, and we have to figure something else out to be ready to go if it doesn't. And in that way, it looks like they plan to not sign Ederson. But I mean, it was early June when he joined that team, and they would have seen, what they saw, whatever it was in a medical, which seemingly is about his knee. And when he came over to Manchester for I think he was in Manchester. He was in England. I don't know if he's actually in Manchester, but he was in England and afterwards and came for a medical. He was with knee specialists for 2 days. And so clearly there was something there for them. They're not, I'll give a parallel here was when they signed Lenny Yoro, he had an issue in his foot that they didn't know about when he joined. And I guess they didn't know about it. And then he joined and they did know about it in looking in the records. And it was an issue where it might be okay. You might do surgery. It might go bad. He breaks his foot. We were there in person for that one, you and I. He breaks his foot in preseason. He's out for months. As a young player, you've spent a lot of money. Not a good start. Not what you want to have happen. Talking about a 27-year-old who you only put a 4-year contract on that has a meniscus injury. And like I do, that there's a lot of different ways that people deal with meniscus injuries and lots of different, sometimes they just, go in and remove some stuff and send them on their way, and they may not notice it, but that could lead to further problems down the road rather than a full, repair. So it seems like to me that my understanding of it, there's just a difference in medical opinion between the specialists United would use in their risk assessment versus, what Atalanta might be looking at in terms of, we'll just play the player through, this is not an issue for us type of thing. United obviously not wanting to take that risk or seemingly saying, well, if we think he's going to need a surgery that might put him out a few months, there's risk involved. We want a lower price. Somewhere in that range of discussion is where things happen. But I think they've had doubts for long enough to plan ahead to it almost looks like, they had these alternatives lined up already, which they probably did essentially.
I mean, to me, James, if you have an alternative lined up, because the Tielemans price is pretty much the Ederson price.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't know how any sporting director looks at Ederson, looks at Tielemans and says, let's go for Ederson. To me, Tielemans is such the obvious better option that, if you look at Tielemans' stats, and I really hate judging players on stats, we have eyes, his passing range is fantastic, right? He's Champions League ready. When I woke up, was it yesterday morning?
Yeah.
And I shroom still on glue I'm sniffing last night, still under the influence. What? Closing a good eye and everything, looking at it, going, does that say Tielemans? Went through all these different emotions. I'm like, this is just way too sensible. This is United's recruitment over the last couple of seasons has been very good, to be fair. They've had a high success rate with the players that they've signed. I'm going, immediately I felt really positive about it. I'm thinking, you can get a player out of a Champions League rival for that price. And one thing about Ineos, James, that we've seen with the way they activate their signings is they have things ready to go.
Yeah.
They typically do their signings back to back to back.
Yeah, they do
Yeah,
all
all the time.
the work, and then it's like knocking them down like
Yeah,
pins at the end. Yeah.
They've signed Santos, Tielemans, and Darlow within a few days. That's the way they do business. That's exactly how they've done most of their other signings. Is when there's two to be done, they're done almost within a day or two of each other. They have them ready to go, ready to activate, and the work on these players begins long before the summer. Of course, Vivell brought Andrey Santos to Chelsea, and I think when you judge a player you don't watch every week, you look at the reaction of their fans.
Yeah.
We do watch them every week. The Chelsea fans are used to a high turnover of players coming in, players going out. I didn't see them behave this way over Cucurella.
No.
Cucurella was a very good left back for them, but I see a lot of Chelsea fans deeply disappointed by the way this has worked out, the way for selling Andrey Santos. I think he played 42 games last season for Chelsea. I think it was
2,400 total minutes and 1,400 in the Prem. Yeah.
So he got plenty of football last season. And honestly, James, I was reading some people turning their nose up at it. I'm really excited to see him in the United shirt. I think that he's going to add another dimension. Now the question is, do United need a third? And I think that they do. Who is that third going to be?
Well, and this is why I want to say that I don't think necessarily that Tielemans was like viewed as a worse signing, but they're looking at what are they missing, in the midfield, because what obviously the midfield has lacked personnel wise last summer, last year, and continues is this high degree of athleticism in there, which is not everything, but it is lacking. Bruno is older. He's also an attacking midfielder. Kobbie Mainoo, a great stamina, great running. He's not fast particularly, and he's not really like a sprinter. Casemiro is obviously, in his older age, not a runner in that sense. Andrey Santos is young, not particularly fast. Tielemans can be quite quick, but he's not known for this as well. And Ederson was kind of in the bracket with Tonali when they looked at those two players, where they're two of the fastest, most high sprint players out there. And so it's not to say that that's everything, because you're not saying you just want a guy who runs, because you can get that anywhere, but it's an attribute, right, that you want to have in your midfield alongside other things, games that are going to be very open, tracking and transitions and speed. And then you have to factor in United's back line is not particularly quick either with Maguire, Lissandro. They're not particularly fast. De Ligt quicker a little bit, but hasn't played in 10 months. The only guys you have with some pace are Lenny and Aiden Heaven, who are wonderful talents, but they're quite young, and so you don't want to have the slowest spine in football, and I think that that's what United are aware of. You can get away with a lot with good technical gifts and abilities, and they've certainly raised the flooring on that. But Ederson is, I think, top of anyone we've been linked to this summer in terms of his sprints and top speed. So that was a big factor in this is how much was in there, and why they like Tonali as well. So I think that for the third one, that's what they're going to look for, is not just a runner or something like that, but someone who also has that attribute, because it's a missing piece of the midfield. However you want to build it and put things together, you want to have someone who's highly athletic. You think about the Newcastle matchups when we played against Joelinton, Tonali, Bruno Guimaraes, just destroyed us. They're not a better team than United, but it's a matchup that was so unfavorable athletically that United really struggled with Newcastle over the years because of it. Even when up a man losing, to Newcastle during a good run of form under Carrick as well, but we couldn't beat Newcastle because it's just such an unfavorable matchup. And it's like rock, paper, scissors. It's not always about having every game. It's the best team is not the best team for every matchup. You want to be able to adjust and adapt and face against certain challenges. So I think that's where the third one comes into play. Now that it's not Ederson, the third one's got to have that somewhere, so they have that option to put into the team. And I'm not sure who it'll be, because you're talking about, you still want a basic athletic, a good technical flooring and good ability. And now you bought a 29-year-old, so you're going to say the last one can't be in that age range. You're going to want somebody else that's in the 25 and under. So you're not rebuilding the midfield again 2 years from now. and I think that's definitely the missing piece they'll go for as that third midfielder.
Well, one of the things that I like about this is that we could be sitting here a week from now talking about a name that's never been mentioned.
Yeah.
Totally. And you have to give United enormous credit for how they've raided the ship and fixed, their own house, put their own house in order by not having leaks, by not doing this through the media, by making sure that they're very smart and sensible about how they go about their business, making sure that this is treated with a certain degree of sensitivity and how important that is for their business. Well, they're not doing this through the media. And I think that is really, really admirable because it's so difficult in this day and age, James, to keep that stuff under wraps, especially when you're talking about agents. Agents get involved and they're the ones that are feeding for Brazil. They're the ones that are putting the stuff out there. And that's often why you get such conflicting information on a transfer, because you get different parties with different perspectives that have different views, and then they're briefing one side and they're briefing another. United will answer a question if you ask him, depending on who you are, but they're not going to tell you. They're not going to say, "Hey, we're going for Tielemans." If you ask them, "Are we going for Tielemans?" You'll get a different answer.
Yeah.
But I think very, very admirable. Mason Mount has been suggested as someone United will look at and playing in the midfield. And I had a couple of games there towards the end of last season. The problem is with Mason Mount, you have to look at anytime he's available as a bonus. You just can't have the confidence.
Yeah.
You can't build a team around on the understanding that he's going to be available.
No.
Most weeks out of, and I would love to be wrong about that.
Yeah.
That's a risk that, to me is not a sensible risk to take.
Yeah, and I don't think they will. I think that's why the third midfielder is certainly going to be someone they bring in that front, because totally agreed. I mean, he hasn't been fit for more than 5 games in a row, I think, since he's arrived. So, definitely not more than 2 starts in a row. So they don't seem like people take gambles on that front. They've been pretty proactive on saying, players who are not available are not in our plans, and to build around. So, yeah, I think they're.
So you're looking at a midfield, James, of Bruno, Kabi, Tielemans, Santos, maybe Mount. Obviously, Agarte's injured. Possibly with one more. So let's say you're looking at a midfield 3 of 5. I think that's about right.
Yeah.
You're still looking at the Fletcher brothers, for
some cup minutes, things like that.
So Bruno, Kabi, Tielemans, Santos, that tells me they need a defensive type midfielder. And typically a defensive type midfielder you can give for cheaper because they're not as flash. To me, if you on a defensive type midfielder, James, that's where scouting really matters, because a lot of their skill set is not obvious. And a lot of the things they do well makes them not flashy. Mm-hmm. If you get a defensive midfielder that does his job well, maybe like an Adam Wharton or someone, they're not, they're not flashy on the eye. Mm-hmm. So the question is, who do I know we've mentioned this, but who will that other player be? And I don't think it's going to be any of the obvious, like an Adam Wharton or someone like that.
Right.
What are we thinking here? I mean, do you need a Premier League player with Premier League experience in that defensive midfield role? I can't even think of a single potential candidate.
There's a few that I've mentioned. So if I want to take into account still that athletic speed, pace, all of that I really do think they want. I think it's real important. I saw David Ornstein mention it on a podcast earlier that they'll definitely really be looking for someone who's athletic and can run high speeds and things like that is missing. So if I factor that in, there's 3 Premier League names that come to mind. One is Alex Scott, who's been mentioned a lot. Not necessarily a pure defensive midfielder, but he's by all accounts viewed as a player who could kind of become anything, in the sense that he's got great physical. He's kind of really well-rounded, fast, plays in that high-pressing Bournemouth team, very strong. Now, additionally, there's his partner, the American Tyler Adams, that United have been linked with as well. And he's also a top athlete, runner, quietly goes about the business quite well at Bournemouth. United have kept an eye on him. he would be more affordable, 40 million, somewhere in that range if they were going to do that. And then the other one that I don't think they'll sign is Carlos Baleba, simply because while he was a top target last summer, he's going to be 80 million, which for a player who's had a bad season on the downswing, whereas you take someone like Alex Scott, you get him for the same price, but you're saying he's on the up and he's growing and you have more confidence in it. I just can't see them doing that one. And I was steered pretty strong away from the idea of Carlos Baleba at the beginning of summer. And so far that's held on as true, that they haven't really made a move for him. Those are your 3 Prem options.
You feel if they were going to do Baleba, they would have already.
Right, exactly. Because it would have been easy to do already if they wanted to do it. So that's your Premier League options. I could see either Scott or Adams happen. I could, but that's not to say that it will. Once you expand it onto the continent, then who knows? I mean, then you've got so many players who are potentially out there.
Then we're talking about what happens to Joshua Zirkzee, because obviously the plan for United with Zirkzee was to sell him and bring in a supplemental striker. Doesn't seem like that's close to happening.
No, and we haven't even heard a single name on striker, but that doesn't mean we're not doing it, because
I know, and that's actually really encouraging, because normally every other season you say United's transfer business is not a surprise, but there is something really, I don't know, there's something really exciting about I'm not someone that gets particularly excited by transfers anymore. I get encouraged by them.
Yeah.
But the idea of some random name being plucked out of nowhere, waking up and seeing that, United have closed, an agreement for him, that means there's a lot of potential players out there we aren't even thinking about, that United will forensically scouted, that give me, when you get these random names, that tells me that's a scouting department.
Yeah, correct. Yes.
Right? Because the top names are obvious.
Yeah.
Tielemans is someone that, if United don't have the football department that they have, that deal doesn't happen. That's correct. About having acumen. That's about being well informed of the market. That's about having proper relationships. That's about an extremely well calibrated process. Now we're talking about, before we get to the left back position in Lewis Hall, let's talk about what happens with Zirkzee, because it's James. United need we talk about a backup goalkeeper. United need a backup forward.
Yeah.
Because it's completely different to Sesko.
Yeah, I know. And that it is a concern for me. Now, obviously, one factor in this is like, it's not a bad thing to have a different option for different games, but the fact that you don't have a similar option is a bit of an issue. Now, one thing I do wonder, and that I've hoped this season to see, is instead of Brian Mbeumo playing in the striker position, Cunha playing there. When we saw for Brazil, he was excellent there. Yeah, Brazil weren't great in this World Cup, but Cunha had a great World Cup, and he was really good in that central position with Vinny on the other side. If you're going to add to that left side of attackers, Cunha can deputize in the center pretty competently, pretty well. And he's not Šeško, but he is more similar, I guess, in terms of he can. Yeah, God, I love the guy so much.
He's grown on so much.
Might be my favorite signing that United have made in a long time.
I love his quality, but also his temperament, personality. What a signing! Imagine trying to sign him now, James.
I know, 150 million. Morgan Rogers being quoted for 130 million.
Yeah.
And you look at Cunha, and I'm like, for what? Cunha's better, and we got him for 62 and a half.
Just love him. Love him.
But yeah, I think Cunha could play. You could play Cunha in the middle and enforce the left. Not saying Cunha would be your starting striker. You'd want to keep him in his position for the most part, and Šeško playing, but Cunha can cover that. And if you if you have enough options on the left, with Dorgu being so flexible in the way he can go in either position, perhaps, and you sign someone else over there, you get options in terms of maybe Cunha goes to the middle. Maybe that's what they're looking at. If it's hard to sell Zirkzee, if you go, all right, look, we'll give it one more try to have something different than what we have with Šeško in the form of Joshua Zirkzee. Invest in that left side and deal with it potentially later. As long as we have enough options, it's okay. You know what I mean? Like, as long as we have enough options, I'm not too worried about it, though I do see the value in a striker. I also think it should be like almost like what I really wish we could do if we were to sign a striker is what we did when we brought Cavani in. You know, if we could have that for Šeško, that would be ideal. But I'm just not sure if that player is out there.
Well, then you have the fact then, what if Marcus Rashford stays?
Right.
Right. Which, who knows what's going to happen at this point?
Right.
Everyone knows I'm biased on this issue, right? But I like to believe I would think this anyway. I think Marcus Rashford, you get a Marcus Rashford that we've seen in Barcelona and Villa at United next season. Now I'm wondering, where do we replace Casemiro's goals? I think that a fit on form Marcus Rashford is a 15-goal a season winger.
Sure.
That in many ways gives you your second striker. Because he could also play centrally if you needed him to.
Yeah.
I don't believe United should be selling him for 30 million. I think he's worth much more than that. But obviously you have the wage factor that United would like to put it. But you also have to factor that United will probably give opportunities next season to Shea Lacey and then of course JJ Gabriel. JJ Gabriel here isn't 16 until October, but I'm certain that JJ Gabriel will play some first team football next season. We'll probably see him in the League Cup, maybe, and it's possible you could see him in the Champions League in one or two of the dead rubber games in that league system. But you know, I know that obviously there's splits opinion, and there's some people that are vehemently against Marcus Rashford being back in the team. Personally, at this moment in time, I think he's an upgrade on what we have on the left.
Yeah, and I think that it's, for me, it's just a question of I don't know what they'll do.
Yeah.
You know, because obviously the issues went deeper, you know, overall, and Rashford's flourished kind of, not to say he couldn't do it at United, but he flourished being able to get out of the environment and the issues that were there and elsewhere and have a big rebound after a little lull over there into these in these other clubs. And you know, and on the same token for United, obviously they've been trimming the wages down. They look at it in a pretty forensic sense and say, you know, are we going to keep him as our highest paid player at the club or on par with Bruno Fernandes? They probably don't want to, you know, do that in a sense, is to have that. I think that the left side money to be spent is the Marcus Rashford money, right? If Rashford stays, that's where then there's no budget on that left side, which you wouldn't necessarily need someone. You have Shaw, Dorgu, Rashford, and Cunha for the left side. You don't really need more, and the youth players, you don't really need more. So, but if he goes, you do definitely need to invest over there. So it's just hard to say. I think that United's certainly right not to accept, you know, 12 or 13 million or something like that from Barcelona as an offer. You know, I do think there'll be other suitors for him, personal opinion, that there'll be other suitors for him out there in Europe among the bigger clubs. I mean, we've seen Bayern come in for some pretty big Premier League and English players over the last some years as well. But it's hard to call that one. It really is. We don't know. Obviously, his relationship with Michael Carrick is a lot different to the past as well.
Yeah, and you know, it has to be a club that Marcus Rashford actually wants to go to. That comes in for him, you know, it's not difficult to find other suitors, you know, other teams that are willing to pay significant amounts of money for him. It's about getting a football club that he actually wants to go to. All right, let's look at the left back situation because you know, Lewis Hall's been heavily mentioned. Newcastle, utterly bizarre recruitment strategy. I don't understand why Newcastle can't be a Bournemouth or can't be a Brighton. I can understand why they can't be a City or, you know, United or Liverpool, what have you. But I don't understand why they can't be someone like a Brighton, with all due respect to them, and talking about and how they, you know, how they go about the recruitment. And you don't need to have, you know, hundreds of millions to be able to do that. They lose their best players. They constantly miss out on their target. It must be terrible to be a Newcastle fan, right? Now Bruno Guimaraes wants to leave, understandably. In what world do Newcastle sell also Bruno Guimaraes and Lewis Hall?
Yeah, it is weird, and you'd have to think that It does feel like there's something wrong at Newcastle, and I think part of the problem is that they have a different view of their own club than the perspective in football. Obviously, they got this big Saudi investment, and I think they, ownership wise, are thinking we're going to be the top club in England, but there's history, and there's
abandoned that project, James.
What's that?
It looks like they abandoned that project because
yeah,
like Iceland type running of the football club.
Yeah, it's very odd. And then, but you look at from the football sense, it's like they misestimated the perspective of everybody else, and they just thought, well, this is how we see it. Well, what about everybody else in football who sees it differently? The players, the agents, clubs, everybody. I think that they were really, really hurt by the Isak situation last year, holding him so strongly against his will till the final moment, making it so difficult. Because when, we've kind of talked about this with some clubs, but, Brighton, Bournemouth, I'm not saying they all bend over and sell everybody, but they kind of do at a certain point know where they're at and know,
yeah, of course,
if we lock these guys down, no one's coming to us anymore because we're not the end goal. We know that. That's just the fact of life. And so we have to sell at a certain point reasonably so players know they come here, and that is what gives them a platform to get to that next step. It is what it is. If you're at Manchester United, we don't want to be that club, but when you're at Brighton or a Bournemouth, you are. And when you're at Newcastle, you are too. And I think that they haven't come to grips with that, or they keep fighting it. But
there's actually really not much wrong with that. Look, United are buying players with the resale value.
Yeah.
Right? United get, pilloried for being bad sellers. But one of the things that gets forgotten, and that's United are not trying, most of the time when United are trying to move a player on, it's because they failed.
It didn't work. Yeah, exactly.
So they're not, they could be better sellers if they wanted to sell Bruno Fernandes.
Yeah, of course. We could sell Bruno.
Yeah, of course. But I mean, all of a sudden you're a better seller when you're selling your best players that are in demand.
Yeah.
Right? So when you're trying to get rid of Time Malacia, it's a bit different.
We had offers for 80 million for Amad Diallo last summer, and we said no because we're not trying to sell our best player, good players. Right? It's
but there's nothing wrong with turning around and saying we're going to refresh the squad up by selling. I mean, Real Madrid do this all the time.
Yep,
there are players at Real Madrid that are very gettable, and they use that. They sell players at a decent price to replenish their squad. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
If you were sensible in how you recruit and you can have the ability to look 2-3 windows ahead, the recruitment, and you can manage that. There's certain continuity to that you can manage that properly and anticipate certain exits. To me, the Isak stuff, all that shouldn't have came as a shock to them. And I think that all things being equal, if I'm Newcastle, I got the better end of that deal.
Yeah.
Well, how you go out and sign Wissa with that money? I mean, how are you not aware of a better striker in world football than a 29-year-old Wissa at Brentford? I mean, that to me is there's people in there stealing the living, James. Like that.
Yeah.
If I'm in a boardroom and someone says, I know, let's sign Wissa as a replacement, I'd fucking body him right there. I'd be like, give us big again. But
so it makes the Lewis Hall
if they're interested.
Yeah, right. So it makes the Lewis Hall thing interesting because, and again, it kind of even ties into the last discussion about that left side and strike, because it's all linked. It's like everything like shifts on an axis there. If you move Dorgu up, you got to sign a left back, but you're only moving Dorgu up if you're not necessarily signing a winger. We don't really know, and there's obviously been some debate here. I think that it even some stems down to, is Dorgu a left back or a left wing? He might be both. Might be viewed one way by the club. Carrick might have a different use of him that he wants. He never played left back for Carrick. Every game he played on the left wing or left midfield. Never played left back. So I sort of look at that and I go, but that might have been because he was using him to cover for the midfield because, Casemiro and Mainu, and we didn't have the refreshed midfield. So maybe we don't really know all the thought process that went into it. But what we do know is United have been looking at fullbacks, and Lewis Hall certainly would be the ideal candidate there. Even beyond the Dorgu thing, Luke Shaw is going into the final year of his contract. He played the most minutes of any United player last season. nobody's banking on that happening again when you're playing 60 games this year in 3 competitions. You know, he certainly benefited from the gaps in schedule, and totally fair play to him for staying healthy, because nobody would have predicted that at the start of the year. And that's incredible, but you're not banking on that for years and years to come. So they need a fullback one way or another, I think. I don't think there's any way around this. They should get a fullback coming in.
And look, I think Mazraoui had a brilliant World Cup. I'm encouraged to see how he does when he comes back. But I think Mazraoui is more of a right back than a left back.
Yes, yeah.
United definitely need someone on the left. Like, I mean, I would imagine they'll loan out young Harry Amash. I don't think Diego Leon is ready for that. It'd be interesting to see what to do with young Orozco, whether they loan him out or whether he comes in. I don't think this is a reasonable expectation, but is he someone that could possibly feature in the first team next season? I'm sure United will get a good look at him over pre-season. Of course, United's first pre-season game is on Saturday against Wrexham. I would imagine be a few weeks before we see the likes of Tielemans, all the World Cup the players, Bruno Fernandes, and imagine it'll still be a couple of weeks before we see them, and rightly so. So it'll be interesting to see. I think Andrey Santos will play at the weekend against Wrexham.
We should. We don't have any midfielders,
so yeah. It'd be interesting. I think Darlow could probably make his debut, because I'd imagine Lamin is going to be off for a few weeks. So could see one or two young players, maybe Shea Lacey in the squad the weekend. Wrexham, it's a championship team. I remember watching United Wrexham in San Diego. One of the things that really stood out for me in that game was how physical Wrexham were.
Yeah, and we had our kids in that game, right?
So be a good test for some of these young United players against Wrexham this weekend. So do we know when Tielemans and all them are going to report for training? Do we have a date?
Cunha should be about, well, he's not signing, but Cunha should be, I think, about 10 more days or something like that.
It's ridiculous how short their break, isn't it?
3 weeks, right? But I guess technically they're allowed to take longer than that, but it's 3 weeks minimum. A lot of times at the high levels, obviously, they take the shorter break imaginable, because, is what it is, right?
First league game.
August 14, 16?
I think it's about that there. Here, let me see. Their first league game is
August 22. August 22.
August 22nd, the way to home.
It's a nice 4:30 a.m. for you for the kickoff. Against Hull. So but so there's time. I mean, most of the nice part is, Ahmad, Ivory Coast went a bit, so he'll be another 10-15 days. Cunha another 10-15 days, but they'll have 3 weeks of training before the kickoff, which is great. They're not going to be out of it. Tielemans, Belgium were not eliminated long ago. He also has he had a little injury, nothing major, but a little one. But so I would suspect more like end of the month for him as well. Obviously Darlow and Santos are there. Whoever we sign next, don't know. If it's someone like Alex Scott, he's already training with Bournemouth. If it's someone like Tyler Adams, another week he'll be available. If it's someone we don't know, could be whatever, right? But yeah, I mean, United should have a pretty full squad before the end of the month, so that should give them enough time. Obviously, minus Manu and Rashford will be the last, I think, to return. Do we have Lissandro Martinez as well? Could be very, very late.
Oh, I'm really looking forward to seeing Licha back. By the way, what a World Cup he's had. Of course, United's finances will be supplemented bit by the residual amount they got on Mason Greenwood, and of course their savings over Ruben Amorim taking the AC Milan job. So that will have helped United a bit.
True.
Be interesting to see what other players, because I still think there'll be still a couple that will leave. That were, I think if one of the worst headlines you can read is Roma are interested in one of your players, because that they're going to offer some shitty loan deal with a buyout clause, 16 years from now, if he scores four overhead kicks against Lazio. Right? I'm reading Roma in for Garnacho. I'm like, I do not need to read any further then Roma are offering a loan with an option. And sure shit, Roma's offering a loan with an option to buy. I mean, they are more loans with Bernie Madoff.
Can you believe that we actually got paid? I'm not insulting this on Rasmus Højlund, but following up to your point, because it was to an Italian club. But can you believe we actually ended up getting paid by an Italian club for a player? 40.
By the way, Rasmus Højlund, as much as I like the kid, has yet to prove he's a £44 million striker.
Right.
He had a decent season at Napoli last season, but not the type of season where you're saying he's proved United wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, Sesko, how's Sesko's injury?
Yeah, he's not in training as of yet. Like in full training. So we'll have to see. We'll have to. I don't know on that front. I'm hopeful. It doesn't seem like it's serious. I mean, obviously, if it's not something that's like surgery and that kind of stuff, then it's not going to be a long layoff here. But I mean, he seems like he's probably on an individual plan simply because he missed the end of the season, and I would say maybe another week or 10 days, and then he'll be back in regular full training. But I haven't heard anything to suggest that he'll be like not ready for start of the season or for later preseason games or anything like that.
I think United made some adjustments to their pitch so that to
reduce the drop off. Yeah,
it's amazing to me United haven't done that before.
Yeah, and padding to the boards. Yeah, as well. Yes.
I understand why, for the drainage purposes and everything, why it's slanted like that. But to me, it's such an obvious. You've got assets on the pitch that are worth hundreds of millions of pounds, and you have this big dip where, you need a parachute if you get pushed over the side of it. I mean, it's incredible that they've let it go on that long.
It's this really silly underinvestment that ends up costing you, that just was like, these are all those little things that before Ineos came in, it probably was never even like, man, we don't want to spend the money on it. And it's like, how many, it's crazy.
To me, it's just such a liability. Before we go, James, a quick comment on the stadium, because we had some announcements between our last podcast. What's your take on the stadium?
Yeah, I mean, it's much like the transfers we've done this summer. They've gone from a long, protracted negotiation with the rail yard to overnight buying something totally different in a different spot at a better price, which is hilarious.
Privately funded. They've mentioned that it's being privately funded. There's no taxpayer resources being used. Not exactly what was first proposed, but then I would imagine that that's normal. You're going to see it.
It's
obviously some alterations, customizations based on certain circumstances, and some people, they. I don't know anyone that's 100%.
Yes,
because there's a trade-off, right? I understand wanting a new stadium, right? You have to move with the times. I was listening to Andy Mitten talk about in 1910 when United moved to Old Trafford, and a lot of the reactions back then to the move were exactly the same as how are we going to pay for it? We're leaving behind, this we're leaving behind our spiritual home.
Right.
We're not going to be able to fill it. It's going to all this stuff. From a nostalgic perspective, it's hard to leave Old Trafford. Anyone that can be certain of the move to the new stadium without any emotional attachment to Old Trafford, I don't know how you can do that. That doesn't mean that you don't have to be pragmatic. Real Madrid, new stadium, Bayern Munich, new stadium. You've got Barcelona with the new camp. This is just a necessity that you have to. Stadium's going to cost so much because of the lack of investment in United over the years, and so it's. Unfortunately, it's a necessity, but it's just going to be interesting to see where the money's coming from.
Yeah, for sure. I completely agree with you. And obviously, you have that question of like, well, what you don't want it to totally affect everything. You don't want it to totally put a drain on the resources and the football, but it's still the big question because they keep moving it forward. And then that final question comes in. How do they pay for it? How do they get this done? And you still have to think some part of it is going to have to come via partnerships, some ownership aspects.
Yeah, you're going to have naming rights sold, and you're going to have all types of. I mean, you're not going to get that whatever stadium is built. it's going to have a commercial name to it. The
Yeah.
United, and it's easier to sell the name and rights to a new stadium than it is to sell the name and rights to Old Trafford.
Yes.
You know, it's so the way of the world, my friend. All right, Jamesy,
Indeed.
we'll leave it
All
there.
right.
It's been an hour. Thanks for doing this. Good to have you back, mate.
Yes,
It,
indeed.
we'll be busy throughout the season, throughout the summer. So as things continue to develop, we will continue to record. At the very least, we'll do our weekly pod. Looking forward to another exciting season, Champions League football. So we'll probably be busier this season than we were last.
No doubt. No doubt.
All right, mate. James, all the best. Thanks to all of you for
See you later,
downloading
buddy.
the pod as usual. Much love to all of you, and we'll be back next week. Cheers, James.
Bye.
See you, mate.